my track I've called Be Everywhere, or the Bitcoin symbol everywhere. And I'm going to talk about something called BIP 177 and beyond. There's a number of people here who are not super familiar with Bitcoin. And so I'll tell you what BIP 177 is in a moment. But what I want to do today is first give everyone a little bit of inspiration, talk about the problem statement, BIP 177, discuss the design challenges that we're going to work on, and my plan for today. So when I first kind of sat down with Mo and others to organize this week here in Silicon Valley, I thought that my ambition for hosting a design event in San Francisco would be to really attract a lot of top tier designers to the room to collaborate together. And kind of my most ambitious archetype for the type of designer that we can engage would be Johnny Ive, right? Like, imagine if Johnny would come to a conference like this, and certainly kind of like maybe over ambitious, but nevertheless, I was able to find Johnny's email address. And a few weeks ago, I sent Johnny Ive an email, literally. And I said, we're hosting this design week in Bitcoin. We're going to gather the best Bitcoin designers in the world. We're going to have, designers from Silicon Valley come. We're going to talk about Bitcoin design. What would be your advice for designers? What would be your advice for designing Bitcoin? And unfortunately, Johnny did not respond to me. But there's a really wonderful interview with Johnny Ive with Patrick Collison from May a few months ago, where they sat on stage. It's an hour-long conversation. It's a really wonderful interview. Really recommend it to you all. And in that conversation, there's a couple of like really powerful and philosophical quotes that he shares. And I like to imagine that had Johnny responded to me, he would have pointed me to his talk and these quotes, because I think it's kind of like evergreen advice for designers and design. So this is one of them from his interview. Design is a way of expressing our gratitude to the human species, right? And the man is so philosophical and deep about the role of his work, culture, and for people. And he goes on to say that we have an obligation and a responsibility to care for each other. And so I share these thoughts with you as designers in a design community as we think about Bitcoin, thinking about all of the little small decisions. And, there's another related quote in this part of what he's talking about, where he wants someone, when they're unwrapping the, power cord on, their Apple device, to think or to feel that someone gave a shit about me. And I think we should think about all of our design decisions in Bitcoin through that lens. So that's just my inspiration for, so not specifically my track, but certainly applies to my track. And the zoom out question that I want to ask as part of my design challenge and the work that I want to do today, and this is a lot of the work that I've been kind of advocating for in the Bitcoin design community over the past few months, is to think about this. How do we touch, see, and talk about Bitcoin? Okay. And really, this is about how the world comes to Bitcoin at its kind of like outermost surface area. So yes, we have Bitcoin, the technology, Bitcoin, the products that all sit inside this, but especially for the 7.8 billion people out there who don't have Bitcoin today, they're going to come at Bitcoin through kind of these cultural memes and cultural surface areas. And what I mean by that, before I get into what I mean by that, let's talk about like what is Bitcoin, so that we can kind of zoom in a little bit. So this is everyone will have their own definition for Bitcoin, but this is, I think, a helpful one: a universal and neutral way of measuring, storing, and transacting value. But I want to double click on this word of measuring, because if we're going to measure value, we're going to have to represent value as well, right? And so what do we mean by representing value? Well, if we fast forward a number of years, Bitcoin as a new form of money for the world, right, is working towards progressively becoming a means of exchange for the world and eventually a unit of account for the world. And if and when that happens, years from now, and this is, being in Bitcoin is kind of like this challenge of thinking super long term. So we need to think in these super long terms. So thinking years from now, when Bitcoin is a unit of account in the world, really what we're talking about is that everything will be priced in Bitcoin. And once everything is priced in Bitcoin, then we have this opportunity now to think about how we want those prices represented in the world. And that's what I mean by this kind of top level surface area of Bitcoin. Eventually, we're going to see everything priced in Bitcoin. So what does that literally look like? What do those prices look like? What do those quantities look like? And so this is the coffee shop that happens to be near my hotel, Haraz. And the other day, got an Americano and it was $6.25. That looks very familiar. Dollar sign, 6.25. That's how we're used to seeing prices today. But if we kind of fast forward, again, number of years, and this might be priced in Bitcoin, would we like to see the price stated as such, these big decimal quantities? This is kind of like the default in Bitcoin is to represent it with 8 decimal places. That's not particularly friendly. Or this maybe on the surface of it looks a little bit better, 5,000 sats, but it has this word sats, right? If you're new to Bitcoin, like 7.8 billion people in the world they're not going to know what a sat is. So it imposes this kind of educational speed bump on people. Or is this better? The Bitcoin symbol with a price quantity. You can circle it there for you. And perhaps you've gathered that I'm an advocate of this representation. Okay, so that's prices, but the way that we're going to kind of get there is this is going to be led by people building Bitcoin products today, by which I really mean wallets. So this is just some mockups from the Bitcoin Design Guide that I've grabbed just to kind of show you in a little bit more detail what this might look like in a notional Bitcoin product in a wallet. So on the left, this is kind of like a before where you have some of the quantities represented in decimal BTC terms. There's a fiat value there as well. And then we have, sats. And so you have this kind of like confusion between sats and decimals. Or, if we move to this representation where we just represent quantities with the Bitcoin symbol and as integers, it's just wholly consistent, I would argue, cleaner. I've mentioned BIP 177 a couple of times now, so let's talk about that very quickly. A BIP stands for a Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. And it's just a description in a documented and detailed form for a proposal, a change to Bitcoin. It is not in any sense kind of like officially adopted in its own right. It's just a very kind of like structured way of proposing something to the Bitcoin community. Generally speaking, BIPs are technical in nature. And BIP 177 especially was authored by someone named John Carvalho about a year ago, maybe. And it's a design proposal, really, for representing Bitcoin quantities in this way. So using integers only and no longer using the decimal format, using the Bitcoin B symbol, adopting this equivalency of 1 BTC equals 100 million Bitcoin. And in BIP 177, it's proposing to use the word Bitcoin to talk about the base units. Now, the language use of it, I'm not personally, I could go either way on, but I'm hugely on board with the rest of this proposal. And the rest of today's track is going to kind of explore this from the design angle. The quick rationale, I've already hinted at a little bit of these, but why? First of all, I think it's easier for people to come at Bitcoin if they don't need to learn about the fact that there's 100 million Satoshis in every Bitcoin. It's consistent. You don't have to think about representing some quantities as decimal form or integer form anymore. Everything is just integers. We've talked a little bit about the brand, but I think there's something pretty deep here as well. If we fast forward down the road, if we don't make a change from the path that we're on, eventually all of the prices in the world are going to contain this label of sats and not the Bitcoin symbol. And so we're going to live, in this strange world where Bitcoin has become ubiquitous money, but yet sats are the thing that everybody sees and feels and no longer the Bitcoin symbol. And I think that's kind of sad. And we have this opportunity now that in this window may not last very long, where we could potentially kind of deflect our trajectory. And I personally think it's cleaner, though that's more of a subjective thing. This is already being adopted by a number of Bitcoin wallets. Some logos up here. Lexi is one of the startups that is based out of here in Presidio Bitcoin, who I think we're going to hear from later today at lunchtime. But this is their product, and they recently adopted this change. Just 2 weeks ago, they made a change to their app, where now Bitcoin quantities are represented with the Bitcoin symbol. They changed this from sats. It's good. This is just, to give you some sense for some other wallets. This is what Stash Pay looks like with the symbol. This is Wallet of Satoshi that now provides the option. And this is a 7-Up pop machine at a Bitcoin company in Vancouver called Mint Green, where the pop is 42 Bitcoin. Scan the lightning code. It was the first time that I've seen it out in the world, on a physical thing. Okay, so what are we going to work on today? So I just want to explore these questions. How do we get more wallets using the Bitcoin symbol? How do we get merchants maybe representing the prices using it? There's some lingering questions and design discussions with the community around how we do it internationally. Do we adopt the local convention, or do we think it's more sensible to have like a universal representation of prices around the globe? How do we handle large quantities? Does the use of BTC still make sense? Do we need two different ISO codes? So those are some lingering questions we can discuss. Then I actually want to kind of shift gears and also think about like this notion of how we touch Bitcoin. If Bitcoin symbol is going to proliferate throughout the world and we're going to represent prices as such, then we're going to need to be able to type the Bitcoin symbol on keyboards, literally. You can't do it today. And so I don't hear anybody talking about that. And that's going to be many years in the making. And so we need to start thinking about how would a Bitcoin symbol appear on a keyboard? It's an interesting design question. Where would it appear on soft keyboards? Is there anything that we can do in the interim before we're waiting for that? So this is some of what we'll discuss as well. And then I also want to explore the Bitcoin symbol as used as part of kind of human readable Bitcoin addresses. And already we have Lightning addresses, and there's a new proposal called BIP 353 for doing it a slightly different way. And we're talking about using the Bitcoin symbol to indicate that an address is a BIP 353 address and calling them kind of these B addresses. So I'd like to just spend some time. Do we like that? Can we do better? And if we do like it, how might we use design to kind of further advocate for this? So the plan for today, I'm looking for people that are excited about BIP 177 and are on board with this. I have an idea for vibe coding up something. Perhaps not surprising, I love to vibe code, so we'll do at least a couple of vibe coding things, work on the keyboard thing, jam on open questions, create some new designs. And if you are not a lover of BIP 177, then maybe not the group for you. That's it.